Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. MBA Spotlight Day 3 here. Today's panel is on diversity and inclusion in MBA programs. So I have 5 wonderful mix of alums, recent graduates, and people who just finished their first years at 5 business schools around the world. So we're going to do today live questions. So if you're watching this, you have questions, comments, feedback about anything, please punch it on into the live comments. I'll do my best to get as many questions as we can, as long as those questions are related to diversity and inclusion on MBA campuses. We're going to start with we're going to go around the horn with this group and just have everybody introduce themselves and talk about their background and where they're going to school or where they just graduated from and what they're up to now. So I'm going to go ahead and start with, how about Roderick? Do you want to kick it off?
Yes, thank you so very much, Charles. My name is Roderick Milligan. An upcoming second year at the Tuck School of Business, so pretty excited about that. And I'm the Diversity and Inclusion Chair at Tuck, and I'm also a fellow at the Center of Business and Strategy for Digital Strategies. And prior to Tuck, I held various positions at Chevron. So I was a drilling and completion engineer for them. And now I'm currently at Apple, a part of their global supply manager group.
Love it. Thank you, Roderick. Mariel.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm Mariel Senna. I am a rising second year at the University of Michigan Ross School of Business. Before Ross, I was working in hospitality strategy and operations. And this summer, I'm working for DaVita, a healthcare company, in their Redwoods Leadership Development Program. And I'm the Vice President of D&I at the University of Michigan for our full-time MBAs.
Awesome. Thank you, Mariel. Daniela.
Thank you, Charles. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. So my name is Daniela. I recently graduated from IESE Business School in Barcelona, Spain, which was definitely a huge perk of going to school in Spain. I am originally from Venezuela, but have worked on and off in the US. And most recently, I did my summer internship for my MBA in Kenya, in the financial services sector. And as soon as the COVID situation is a little bit better, I will be moving to Mexico. I'm joining AB and Bev, their GMBA program, as a full-time there.
Awesome. Thank you, Daniela. Ayana.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Ayana Kennedy. I am a rising second year at the Wharton School. Before coming to Wharton, I was also in oil and gas at ExxonMobil for the past 6 years, where I did various engineering roles, then switched into more business development roles before enrolling in school. This summer, I am actually pivoting into consulting. So I'm working at Deloitte in the human capital practice. I'm actually looking to pivot full-time into diversity and inclusion work. And currently at Wharton, amongst everything I do, with diversity specifically, I am the Return on Equality co-president. So that's our main diversity and inclusion organization.
Awesome. Thank you, Ayana. Last but not least, Julio.
Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for joining. My name is Julio Cedeno. I'm originally from Houston, Texas, and I also worked in oil and gas at Chevron. I was a facilities engineer in Houston and in Western Australia before business school. I actually learned about business school through my wife. She got her MBA at Yale School of Management, and then now I just graduated from Harvard Business School. Last summer, I worked for BCG doing consulting, and I'm planning to return there full-time, but not until January here in Los Angeles. And just yesterday, or Monday, I started an internship with Vamos Ventures, which is an impact venture capital fund focused on Latinx founders. At school, I was highly involved with LASO, which is the Latino student organization, in particular with admissions, which is something I'm very passionate about, is getting more underrepresented minorities into business schools.
Outstanding. Thank you. So again, if you're watching this live, feel free to ask us questions. I want today to be short questions, long answers from these guys. So I'll do my best to synthesize what you guys are asking about. I'm going to start with a really obvious topic of the day, which is obviously we have a whole lot going on here in the US in terms of all sorts of protests and all sorts of social change going on. So what are you seeing on your MBA campuses as far as the response to those events? What are schools doing? Are you seeing the response that you want to see from school leadership? And feel free to jump in, absolutely anybody.
Yeah, I can start with this question. So it's definitely been an interesting time the last 3 weeks or so, right? With the current climate in the world. I think Wharton is doing really well with trying to engage the student organizations to see what their responses should be. So for Wharton, we have 3 Black associated organizations. They're AMBA, Carabiz, and WASA. And they've really looked to those student leaders to help like lead the efforts of what they need from administration to be able to then make actionable items, right? I think they've done really well with engaging them. But on the flip side, we're also looking at what allyship looks like, which I think is really big. So for us, for Return on Equality, we're actually hosting an event this Saturday where it's actually for non-Black students to understand like, okay, what can I do? What is my part in this effort? Because I think some of the issue is you just don't know, right? And we've realized that even before everything kind of heightened in the last few weeks, that sometimes you just don't know the answer. Like you want to help, you're not sure, how to talk to your friends in this situation. And so like, I think allyship, we're really pushing that as well. And so I think Wharton has done really well to kind of like push out there, we're behind our Black students, we're behind everybody. And like, this is what diversity and inclusion is really about. So that's my take.
And I think I saw Roderick light up at the beginning too. Go for it.
Yeah, so I believe Tuck responded really well. Before the George Floyd incident happened, you had the Ahmaud Arbery incident, and we met with administration, and they did a really good job backing us. This is the Black Students at Tuck Association, and then I'm also the D&I chair. So they helped us organize an event with the student body to do an Ask Me Anything event for the Ahmaud Arbery case. So then, we had a really good response. A lot of people joined. They even they didn't go to class so that they can hear our side and understand where we're coming from. And then the George Floyd incident happened, which is was quite tragic. But then again, the administration is still back to us even more. And we have a series that we're building up right now, an allyship series, which I think is really important. And I'm glad to hear that Wharton's doing the same thing. And it's going to be a 3-part series to kind of, teach people how to be an ally and also give them tools to be a good ally, and I think that's one of the hard parts. The second part of that is the student body's response. So, after the Ahmaud Arbery incident, I was kind of drained, and, you pretty much open yourself up to the student body. But, the non-Blacks at our school, particularly, the white students gathered together. They came up to me and asked me, hey, what can we do? And they came up with a good idea about starting a book club. And the book club the book they're going to read is The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. And I believe it's first you have to understand the history and know what's going on and how we got there to actually start empathizing. And they're leading this effort. And I'm a part of that facilitator group, and it's small groups. But the good thing is the staff and the dean is all a part of this book club. So it's not just the students; it's the entire Tuck student body and the administration. So I think Tuck did a really good job responding to this.
Happy to hop in as well to sort of give some color on what Ross is doing. So I think you can see with Ayanna and Roderick's response, you can sort of classify responses into what's being done at the programmatic level from staff and faculty, and then what's being done by students. I think initially we felt like from faculty and staff that maybe there was an initial like slow speed to response, I think, because people were trying to figure out what exactly is the language we're going to use, what exactly are we going to commit to. And so we worked with the dean as well as other folks as they sort of crafted a message, just first to sort of stand in solidarity. But second, really, the following statement issued by our dean was really centered around this like call to action. So not just saying that we stand with you and we acknowledge your student statements, but these are things that the faculty and administration commit to doing over the course of the year. So that to me has been something that has been really exciting to be working on, is just recognizing that, of course, most schools are student-led. You're going to hear that from most from most of the business schools that you'll be chatting with, but really it needs to come from both sides. So we're really excited this year to be working with the dean on a task force to review all of our core curriculum and ensure that there's diverse protagonists, and that we're also covering cases that specifically engage with the intersection of business and race, and devoting some of our series of the course of the year to that as well. On the student end, I think you're going to see this at a lot of schools, is that, as you saw, like different clubs are coming together to really understand how they can collaborate, specifically not just with communities of color, but the Black community at their schools. Again, something that we're really trying to balance is, of course, like providing this collaborative opportunity, but also not constantly looking to our Black classmates to tell us what to do and ask them constantly to collaborate. It's also like getting our own stuff in order. So a lot of the feedback we've been telling clubs is, look internally. Do you have diverse club membership? Do you have diverse programming? Like, that's stuff that you can work on, and then have very clear asks for the Black student community and the clubs that represent them before constantly trying to collaborate. So I've been really excited and motivated, and just like the other students, we're hosting an Allyship 101 series that kicks off tonight. Definitely will be following up with Roderick and Ayana to see if there's some stuff we can do to not reinvent the wheel. But yeah, we're definitely seeing so many students across spectrum of color and white students that really are just feeling very motivated to do the work, and feeling very ready to participate in education, learning opportunities, to be allies, and to stand up for social justice.
Really quick, I think Marielle made such great points in terms of, like, I feel like the communities have just come together, which is really great, right? Like, the camaraderie that has been built out of like such unfortunate situation has been pretty impressive to me. People reaching out like, what can we do? I want to be on the panel. Can I lead a small group dinner? Like, everyone has come to support, and it seems like that's happening at all the schools, and it shows you like how deep your school pride is, right? That you like care about one another, especially like with these bigger classes when you literally might not know a fourth of your class, right? Like, my class is 856 people. There's just no way I can know everybody, but everyone's trying to be there for you. And I think that's really key.
And Julio, I think I saw you light up.
Yes, yeah, I think echoing a lot of what everyone said. I think as a recent graduate, it's been great to see and like leverage our position as alumni, and particularly recent alumni, with the current students. And so seeing how in our case, I think the students have been unbelievable in the African American Student Union, ASU, as well as in a number of the other organizations. And that's something that's been consistent my whole 2 years. And I think the administration is listening and paying attention and saying the right things. And for us, what we're really driving for is an action plan, targets, goals, specific things that can be done. I think we're proud of a lot of what HBS has done. Like, we do have some progress in diverse case protagonists. We do have some diversity in staff, but it's nowhere near what it needs to be or what it should be. And the students, I just am amazed by how they push and press for that, and the change is going to be there. And I think that the school is listening and paying attention, and the students are applying the pressure and trying to drive things. But I think we're working together as well as ever, which has been really special and rewarding and exciting to see.
Awesome. I'm going to take an audience question. I had 4 or 5 people ask a version of the same thing, which is, when you first come to campus and you're in this diverse student body, tons of nationalities, tons of backgrounds represented, what is that like at first? How do people start breaking the ice? Is there any awkwardness in the beginning? And Daniela, I'd actually love to hear your take on this, going to a European business school where the demographics are maybe a little bit different. What does it feel like for people on their first day on campus when there's people from all over the place and all sorts of backgrounds?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the huge benefits of going to business school in Europe is that my class in particular was very different, at least for Ayana's, for example. We were only 370. And in those 370, it was over 64 nationalities. And so we have 5 sections at IESE, and within each section, there's about 9 teams of 9 people. And so each team really, from my perspective and from what I've worked with admissions, because I failed to mention I was president of Women in Business Club while I was in and at IESE. And so one of the perks was working with admissions, specifically with points such as this one, right? Like so many people from different backgrounds, different perspectives, different experiences, communication styles. How do you manage, right? And I think that IESE does something that's really great. Your first orientation week, the second day of orientation, you go on a scavenger hunt through Barcelona. So you're given this iPad where you have these challenges, and each team has to kind of run through the city. And then there's winners within each section. And so I think for me, that was the first time that, within my team, we were 9 people from Japan, Nigeria, the US, Brazil, Korea, Spain, France, and myself. So the nine of us were from completely different backgrounds. And so just that day where you're kind of running around in crisis, you already start to notice, okay, well, what's everybody's way of, maybe because I'm Latina, I tend to kind of speak, with a more screaming type of excitement. And then maybe in Korea that can kind of be seen as being, kind of not as educated. And so kind of learning all of these different rules of communication. I think at IESE, you kind of you don't even have time to be overwhelmed, because you're kind of thrown into it and you're surrounded by so much diversity that you just kind of have to go with it and face it head on.
Anybody else want to jump in on kind of what happens initially on campus as people are meeting other students that might be nothing like anybody else they've ever met? Ayana?
Yeah, so I think we have something similar at Wharton. So what we call it is preterm. So this is 3 weeks before the second years even come on campus, right? No one's on campus. You start at the beginning of August, and it's just your first year MBA class that's there. And similar to what Daniela mentioned, like we're broken up into 4 overall cohorts that are then broken down even more into groups of 70. And these are the people that you'll take like all of your classes with for your first semester, all of your core classes. But before you even get to your classes, there's just so much programming and events to meet all these different people, but in pretty intimate settings, right? So it's not as awkward, like you're just walking around as one of 856 people. So they make it so that you can have that interaction on a one-on-one level. I mean, of course, business school, there's partying, there's probably an event, at least one event every night, especially during that preterm timing. So like you can have that social bonding and just have some time to like get to know all these different people. Like, at the end of the day, drinking food and drinks, it's a common language for everybody, right? So it does make it really easy for all of us to kind of bond over that. And then like, also like what Daniela said, so we have like this Olympics that we have. And so all the class, like all the 4 different cohorts are competing against each other. So now you're bonding in different sports and activities even further, right? And so you're breaking those initial barriers before you even start classes, right? Like some people have met like their best friends. One of my best friends, I met her, like we were both co-captains for the dance Olympics team. And we continued that throughout the whole year, right? And we ended up being in the same cohort. And so we had all the same classes together. And so like you start to have those bonds really early on. And I would say it's probably similar for most schools that there's some type of like orientation that you're doing to help with that initial like awkwardness and kind of phasing that out.
Awesome, thank you. I thought I saw Julio's mic light up. Did I hallucinate that?
Sure. Yeah, I think for us, it's the section experience. So HBS is also a massive school, 930 students or so, and you're into 10 sections of 93. And that 93 represents the diversity of the 930 with male, female, international, domestic, and everything else that you can imagine that makes a class unique. And so that's the best way that I think it makes it a lot more manageable. So while there are countless events every single night, you're double and triple booked on fun things, academic things, social things, everything along the spectrum. But you can use that to get into more manageable pieces. If you're a small group person, you can go to small group dinners with 3-4 people. If you're a party large group person, there's events with 100, 200, 300 people there and so on. So it's really up to you to find where you're going to thrive, but the options and the availability is there from day one.
Just got an interesting question. Did any of the diversity and inclusion initiatives factor into your decisions of which business school to choose? I think we're hearing lots of positive things about what's going on campus, but did that change how you thought about which business school to attend? Good, Maria?
Yeah, it actually completely shaped the schools I ended up applying to. So I was not super convinced about going to business school and was living in the Bay Area at the time. So fortunately had access to 2 business schools in the area, Berkeley and Stanford. And so visited both of those schools during their respective diversity weekends. Highly recommend, if you're near schools, going to their prospective student programming, because it's a really great way to just sort of understand what does DEI look like there if it matters to you. And so I think it was actually at Berkeley's event that I was really convinced that I wanted to apply to a consortium school. I had gone to Harvard for undergrad and had loved my experience, but just felt like I was looking for something a little bit different in terms of having this wider membership of schools that was a part of this consortium network. And if you're not familiar, highly recommend looking at the consortium for graduate studies in business. And so after attending that event and then sort of seeing, for me, a little bit of a contrast at Stanford, where it is very student-led, but a lot of the programming there seemed actually very faculty and staff-led. I just felt like I really wanted to go to a school where DEI was really coming from the student body. And so after visiting a handful of schools during their DEI weekends, those were the schools that I applied to. So it really just depends on what you're prioritizing in your search. Again, every school right now is taking DEI more seriously. So it's not just because it's not a consortium school doesn't mean that they obviously don't care about DEI. But for me, I just knew that I wanted that larger cohort network experience, and that I wanted to go to a school that was a consortium member school.
Butter?
Yeah, so I wasn't able to go to any diversity or inclusion events for Tuck. Around that time, my son was having his first year birthday, and my wife wouldn't let me go, which was understandable. But I was really looking forward to DevCo, and DevCo happens around the end of October, around the beginning of November for Tuck. But I was able to participate in it this year. And the one thing that I did notice is it's a university, it's a school-wide event, right? The applicants that come in for DevCo, they all stay at the students' room, their dorm room. They don't have to, purchase a hotel or anything else like that. And it's pretty much student-led. And you really start to notice that, what diversity really means. It's not just, how many numbers from, underrepresented minority group you have, or how many international students you have. It's that inclusion part that comes with it. And if you don't have that inclusion part, you can have all the best, numbers, you can imagine, but if you don't have that inclusion, you don't feel a part of the university or the school itself. And I think that's what Tuck really has for me. I learned how to ski this year. I didn't know how to ski, and there's a lot of us learning how to ski, and it's a part of that inclusion portion, right, where everyone was learning how to ski. Everyone was learning how to play hockey. Everyone's learning how to do something weird that they don't know how to do before this, like play golf. So I think it's that inclusion portion that really stands out for me. Everyone is always going to focus on diversity and inclusion. I think diversity is something that every administration is going to focus on, but try to look for that inclusion.
Anybody else want to weigh in on that question?
Yeah. So for me, it was definitely a big part of my decision to go to business school in terms of the schools that I chose. Like Marielle, I applied to 4 of 7 consortium schools because I knew that their mission was diversity and inclusion. So that was really important for me. And even further than that, so I actually attended a smaller subset of undergrad. They're called Historically Black Colleges and Universities, for anybody who doesn't know. So essentially, my school was made up of about 85% Black students, right? So that was actually majority in my school. So that was really big for me to see what diversity really looked like in academia. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I worked in oil and gas in the Deep South. So you could probably imagine that diversity and inclusion definitely looked different there too. So, while they were making strides, and I think they had come a long way since I started there 6 years ago, it definitely was like really important for me when I was looking at my schools of where are you at now, and like where are your actionable things that I can see that you're doing. So that definitely played a part in the schools I decided to apply to. And then, like everyone's already said, I think it becomes even more apparent once you become a student, right? Like you can't see like what diversity, equity, and inclusion completely is until you're engulfed in that community. I completely agree. When we think of D&I characteristics, we usually think like race, nationality, right? Gender, but there's so many things. There's a plethora of things that you just like, find that there's differences and you're excited about it and you try new things. And I definitely think like that was super important in terms of my business school experience.
Awesome. Danielle, I thought I might have seen a hand go up briefly. Did you want to jump in? No pressure.
Yeah, no, definitely. For me, I was super interested in going to a school that had a women in business, for example, activity going on. And for me, that's a big part of business school diversity and inclusion. I think that a lot of the times, there's so many things going on that, for example, we had some classes where all of our cases would be male based and nobody would have noticed, right? And so a big part of what the club did, for example, was talking to students about, or to professors, sorry, about, well, why isn't there diversity in the cases that we're reading, right? And for example, there was another case that I remember my first year that caused a lot of commotion because it was involving an employee that had stolen some money. And so it was in an ethics class, and the employee was somebody with a Latin American background. And so we kind of felt that there were some biases that had to be addressed, for example, about, why are we talking about the different nationalities that we're associating to different things, and why we're doing that, and why that can be wrong, or why is it right? And so I think that for me, being president of Women in Business Club was a huge part of my experience, and a huge part of what I was looking for. And so every time I had a call with someone from the business schools that I was applying to, I asked about, their diversity and inclusion, but also their WIB clubs, to see what was going on, if they had the clubs at all or not, and what kind of activities they put together, and if they had a voice amongst the school's management team, I guess. So if you're working with admissions, you're working with the MBA office, and how much they're listening to student opinions.
And Danielle, you actually segued perfectly. You started answering a question that one of the audience members asked. At your respective schools, do you feel that you see your identities in the examples and business cases that are discussed in the classroom? At some of these other schools, what are you seeing? Do you feel like diversity and different identities are being reflected in the cases?
I think it depends on the class. Like the very first, I think my core classes, I didn't see that much diversity in the cases. I remember one case, there was actually a case on a guy from Morehouse. I was really excited about that. I was reading through it and said, "Oh, you went to Morehouse," and I went to Tuskegee, so I went to HBCU as well. And I was able to historically Black college or university. I was able to kind of relate to that case, and it really made me extremely excited to read it. But it wasn't until like the second half of my studies, which we did emerging markets, and emerging markets had a lot of cases with people from international perspective, right? So I thought that was a really good class, but that was really where I saw it the most. I don't think I've really seen that many diverse cases as a whole.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. Business school has a case problem. It's mostly male protagonists, white male protagonists, and the other people looped into the story are like, would barely even get a nomination for like a supporting actor or actress. Like they would be an extra. Like that's 100% the way that it is. And then oftentimes you see things like Daniela point out where there's bias. It's like the person stealing something is a person of color. The person that fucked up is a woman. Sorry, I should not have said that word. My apologies. And it's disappointing. But also, I think what's really, really exciting is that, like, we have, you know, students that are writing cases. There are student-led case competitions. There are schools pushing for new cases to be written. I think it's just a matter of both students pushing and administration committing to diversifying cases, and really making a point of ensuring that, especially for things like core classes where every single person in that program is reading those cases, that those cases reflect at minimum the diversity of the class. So there's definitely improvement. Like, I saw it in more of my electives than I did probably in my core. But I think that it's a huge area of opportunity for business schools. And, you know, I don't think that it's just at the University of Michigan. I think it's everywhere.
Julio, if you have anything to weigh in on this, since you're at the legendary mothership of the case method, how is that working these days at HBS?
Yeah, totally echo everything that Roderick and Marielle have said. It's a massive gap, and I think in particular, it's exactly that. The core classes, which are, in our case, everyone's in the same core classes for their whole first year together with your section. And so everyone sees those cases, and those are not diverse. And you get to an elective where a professor has a little bit more control, a little bit more influence, maybe it's a little bit more internationally driven, to Roderick's point, and the diversity can get a lot better. And so I think that the goal for us, and I know HBS is working on it, and the students, like everyone here, totally are pushing it for it to be a lot faster and more aggressive than what is currently being worked on. I think there's been a stronger push for more female case protagonists lately. Not enough, but at least some progress. Definitely a major gap in underrepresented minorities and international cases still. So I agree with Marielle that it's something that's talked about here. It's something that's worked on every day. It's something that we agree the administration is not doing at the pace that we would like.
Hold on, Charles. Right before we leave, I do want to point out, though, that, you know, after the George Floyd case and everyone became a lot more sensitive about the topic of race, I've had professors talk to me about that, about adding more protagonists, more diverse protagonists to their curriculum, which I thought, you know, they reached out to me. I didn't have to reach out to them. I thought that was really good. But, you know, it's not until you start seeing it, you know, I won't be the person that'll see it, but, you know, hopefully, you know, the second year or, you know, 3 years from now, you know, they'll start seeing a lot more diverse cases where it starts to actually change their perspective of, you know, what diverse candidates can actually do in business.
Yeah, and I think, to be fair, there has been some progress. Like, students the year before us wrote a case on African American and race and inequality that I think's been being shared around quite a bit. And that's been a great case. My closest friend, my seatmate, person who sits next to me, she just wrote a case on mass incarceration in the US and the implications of race on that. And that's being taught in the core in the first year in our international macroeconomics class to every single student. So there is, you know, work being done, and I think it is being included and incorporated and hopefully being shared to other schools. I've already seen, I think, like Sloan is like taking on that case that we've been doing, again, for just a year. So it's not like we're rah fantastic, but at least it's work that has been being done, not just in the last 3 weeks.
And Meryl, you have a growing fan club. We're getting some good messages from the audience that people are obsessed with you. To make an impression this first half hour. Had a couple of really great questions about the atmosphere on campus. I know we have a lot of regions of the US represented here, hearing some Morehouse, Tuskegee. So somebody from Atlanta was asking, really loves the diverse feel of that part of the country, or at least of Atlanta. What does that feel like on campus and in the surrounding areas? Is that different, do you feel like, in the North versus the South? And if you're looking for that diverse campus feel, how do you feel about the places that you've experienced or you visited or that you attend now?
Yep. I'm gonna start off because, you know, you're gonna be in, you know, Hanover, New Hampshire. I don't know the numbers. I don't know the percentages, right? But you can see it, right? But the thing is, you know, to that point is you don't feel it. And, you know, I think that's the important piece of it. Like, you know, here, I was talking to my wife about like coming to Hanover, New Hampshire. I was trying to convince her to come out to this isolated place, right? And yeah, it was a lot of kicking and screaming, but, you know, I finally got her here, you know, and she agreed to it. But once she like settled in and she came into Hanover, she doesn't want to leave, and we have to leave, you know. we can't stay here forever. But it's a place where you feel like you feel like you're a part of the community, and they don't see you. I don't think they see you necessarily as Black, and that's kind of hard to say, versus somewhere else. Like, you may be in a big city where it's diverse, but you feel every aspect that you're not, that you are not, one of the majorities there. So Hanover isn't diverse as far as the community. Tuck is, but I'm not going to lie about that. But you won't feel it. I don't think you feel it there.
Yeah. So I think we're kind of the opposite, right? So I would say Philadelphia is pretty diverse as a city, but coming from where I was coming from, so just perspective. So I went to school in Greensboro, North Carolina, a smaller city in North Carolina. But like I said, my school was predominantly Black, so didn't really feel like, the outcast, or, I didn't belong at any points. Then I moved to Beaumont, Texas. You guys probably have never heard of it. It is very small in Texas. It's like an hour and a half outside of Houston. It's pretty much the middle of nowhere, which are where most manufacturing plants are a lot of times. Definitely felt, I was one of few, right? And so diversity was very cliche, I will say, my years there. And then I also moved to Louisiana, still the same feel. So actually moving to Philadelphia was the big city. Surprisingly for me at that time, in the last 10 years of my life or so. And so this, like I said, the city of Philadelphia is pretty diverse within itself. And then Wharton is, its own little bubble. And kind of what Roderick already was saying, at the end of the day, you feel like part of your class, right? Like, you feel like you belong, that, there's a space for everybody depending on what you want to do. I don't think anybody has any issues of making their own way, especially when you have such huge classes. There's literally just something and someone for everybody. So definitely haven't had any transitional issues from that perspective. And as Roderick would say, if you can make it in a small town, you can probably make it anywhere. So yeah, it's really a personal preference of what you're looking for, I would think.
Daniela, did you want to jump in on this and kind of give us, because you've lived all over the world, did you want to jump in on kind of that feel of diversity at IESE versus other places you've been?
Yeah, definitely. I think I've been super fortunate to live in Venezuela. I was just saying in our chat that I went to high school in Katy, Texas. So I know I know what you're talking about, Ayana. I'm from Venezuela. I lived in Nairobi for 3 months. Now I'm moving to Mexico. I used to live in New York. So I think a lot of comparison, right? Barcelona per se is one of the most international cities I've had the pleasure of living in. You definitely see it. It's becoming a tech hub. It's becoming a startup hub in Europe because of certain legislations. And so a lot of Europeans or even Americans are moving their operations to Barcelona. And so it's really great, I think, in terms of feeling comfortable in that environment. And a lot of the times people ask, well, I don't speak Spanish, so why am I going to move to Spain? And obviously it's one of the main points, right? A lot of people, I feel like, go to IESE because they want to learn Spanish and have that second or third language there as a strength. Maybe move to a new market, do the jump. So I have non-Spanish speaking friends who are now going to work in Spanish speaking markets, right? And so if that's what you're looking to do, it's fantastic. And then I would say at IESE particularly, and I don't know about the other schools, if you have this, I'd be curious to hear about it. We have the option of doing 2 out of 4 international modules. And the options are in Nairobi, in Shanghai, in New York, and in Sao Paulo, Brazil. And so you have the opportunity to go there for 2 weeks and take classes in a partner business school. So for example, I went to Strathmore Business School in Nairobi, Kenya. And we had cases from Strathmore. So going back to the diversity conversation regarding cases, if you did those 2 weeks in one of those partnering schools, you had the opportunity to read cases on specifically on different regions and learn about different business ecosystems. So I feel like at IESE specifically, hey Nairobi, I see a comment. It's something that works really well.
I'm going to add something onto this question about the feel of the campuses. Had two great questions from the audience, from Alexis and Stephanie, about, do you ever feel like you have to wear a mask when you're on campus? And do you feel like you're seeing much unconscious bias? Is that something that you feel at all when you're on campus? Or the sense that you can't bring your full self to campus? Is that something that comes into play for any of you? Good, Anna.
That is a very interesting question. We actually had this debate in my leading diversity in organizations class last semester. So I'm actually going to be a TA for it next year. And we had the conversation of what does it mean to be your true authentic self at work, right? Are there limits? Are there bounds? And honestly, I think sometimes there are, especially like when you're talking about the corporate setting, right? Or even academia or nonprofit, like they're just some things that you have to understand, they might toe the line. And when we're talking about like professionalism and like, is that in question? That needs to be addressed. I will say from working in corporate to coming to business school, I felt more able to be my authentic self than when I was working for one of the top Fortune 500 companies in the country. Yes, I feel very comfortable kind of coming to class, whatever's on my mind, speak it. And, if we need to take it offline to continue conversations, it feels like the space is there. Whereas sometimes I know like within the workspace, you don't always feel like you have those options. You're a little bit more on edge and worried about what the consequences could be. I do feel like these 2 years are this safe space, and business school as a whole is this bubble where, all these students from all over the world come together, and they're pretty open, a lot more open, I would say, than you are probably when you're working full time. So I definitely enjoy that part. I don't feel like I've worn a mask any day at Wharton, honestly. Good or bad, I definitely feel I can be pretty much authentically me, which I definitely appreciate.
Else want to jump in on that? Julio, Mariel? Good, Mariel.
I definitely would classify this sort of like authentic self into sort of like 3 buckets, like in the classroom, socially, and in recruiting, like professionally, right? Because those are sort of like the 3 areas of your life that you'll have in business school. And I think what's really great is that regardless of which of those areas, I'm sure many of you that are interested in business school or going to business school, like you get the chance to sort of reset a little bit, like whether that's now being more of your authentic self, whether that's exploring an area or identity that like you maybe weren't able to foster in a previous like environment. So I think really thinking critically about like authentically where is an important piece. I definitely think that while I've been able to be my authentic self, that there definitely, as Ayana was speaking to, that there sometimes can be limits in certain settings, right? Like I know that while I feel like, as you guys can tell, I'm pretty outspoken, I raise my hand in the classroom. But I think that professors are still working to both be more inclusive when it comes to like, what's the mix of cold calling versus not? Like, how do I ensure that there's, a diverse set of voices answering this question without picking on people? Like, so I think that that's just an area of opportunity that schools have to better support faculty, to be frank. I think recruiting, like there are definitely companies that are leaps and bounds ahead of others. Like, again, just like I picked schools that were consortium members, I also recruited for companies that were like putting their money where their mouth was and trying to recruit more diverse people and showing that in very real ways. So I feel like because of the very intentional choices that I took, I was able to be my authentic self, but it can be difficult. Like I have a friend who is in investment banking this summer, even got an early offer through some stuff. And she was sort of saying she's still trying to figure out how she should wear her hair. She's a Black woman and she's like, I don't think I can wear my braids. So you can bring your authentic self to work, but there are some industries that are further behind. There are some companies that are further behind. So just it's a tough question because I think all of us that here would say, yes, of course, we're really happy where we are. But doesn't mean that there's not still a lot of areas of opportunity.
Anybody else on this? And actually, Mariel, you addressed another question that some users have had is, what are you seeing in the recruiting process? Does that mirror the experiences you're having on campus? And Julio, I feel like I've been ignoring you for a little bit, so feel free to jump in if you'd like.
No problem. I think that the bubble that we live in business school is so much nicer and a nice change of pace from the real world, but we have to, or I've had to at least like try to recognize how much of this am I changing here and how much of that do I want to maintain or do I need to maintain going forward. And at school, it's great. I think I found when I'm with the other Black and Brown students, a lot of us met through a program called Management Leadership for Tomorrow, or MLT, before school. So we like knew each other coming into school. We obviously build on that when we get there. And I've never been more my authentic self from my family to like that group of students at HBS, which has been really special. And I think it's like 90% there with my section and other classmates, and it's something that grows through time. But it's also a struggle when in the classroom, to Mariel's point. Like I think for us, one that you sadly have to like represent your group or your people or your city or your country, and everyone has that in class, and so there's a lot of pressure. While I think it's very important, it's also a little bit unfair when we're in underrepresented groups that are needing to speak up, especially against certain biases or stereotypes, or be the minority person or the diverse person that's not fair. Like, you know, it's just that burden that a lot of us have talked about. And so I think it's been better than anywhere else I've been before. And I think it's making progress, and it's helped me grow and change a lot. And I think strive for how I'm going to be in work going forward and what companies I'm going to be at and things like that, to Mariel's point. But yeah, I've been very grateful for school. And now my personal challenge is figuring out, okay, how do I like keep this and not revert to who I was before, and in environments that do the same for others.
Anybody else want to jump in on that question?
Yeah, I'll say something about being your authentic self. I think there is a place, you know, where you can be your authentic self. If you're going to recruit, you know, you're going to recruit for a certain position, right? And you know, you have to also feel who that person is that's interviewing you. It's just Tuck is such a small school that most of the time the people that are interviewing you are Tuckies. So that initial like interview is quite relaxed, right? You know, you still have to be professional, but you can still bring your authentic self. But then, you know, you have different layers of that whenever you're interviewing with the director or whoever's going to hire you, right? But inside of school, I think our school is so small that you can't hide yourself forever. And like there are only a few bars like in Hanover, so you're gonna have to be your authentic self at one point in time, and you'll find out that you know people are quite accepting of who you are. Don't put too much pressure on yourself about showing people who you are. I mean, we even go drinking with our professors, to be honest with you, because like I said, there are only about a couple of bars there, and we see them and they get drunk with us. So we're our authentic self. They're their authentic self. You know, bring your authentic self. Just make sure that you do it like in the right setting, though. You can't always, just be yourself. I think you can be yourself. Just bring that professional aspect of who you are, and also, know when to bring that social aspect of who you are. Still be your authentic self.
And really quick, yeah, just to like piggyback off of what Roderick, Mariel, and Julio have said, I think it's really interesting that where you're at in your life now is very different from when you were recruiting undergrad, right? So like realizing that you have a point of reference, you know what works for you and what doesn't. And so, yes, you're trying to go to the top investment banking, place or consulting firm. But at the end of the day, remember that you're interviewing them too, right? And so I think we've kind of touched on it a little bit, like going to these events and actually getting to know people who work there and like talking to your alumni base of current or ex-employees to see, why did you leave, right? Like, what are the things that I'm missing about this place that I think I want to work after business school? And I think you get a lot of insight that you probably didn't have, 5 to 8 years ago when you were saying, I just want a job and I just want to get paid, right? You're just in a different space now. And so like you can set what diversity and inclusion looks like within your recruiting. And I think that's really important at this stage in your life.
Daniela, did you want to get in on this one at all with the international perspective?
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree with everything that's been said, and I do feel like sometimes some people can go into business school and have a big name in their head about where they want to work and not necessarily go through the due diligence process, right? And I completely agree with Ayana. It's much as an interview process from us to our company or from us to the program that we're applying to in terms of MBA schools as it is the other way around. So I every time I talk to prospective students for ESA, I tell them try to speak to as many students as you possibly can. My family has historically gone to a specific MBA program, and I spoke to countless students, and there was no match. I felt zero passion in regards to feeling like those people had the same maybe interests as me. There wasn't as much as a women in business movement as I was looking for within the school. The diversity of the class maybe was more focused post MBA towards like tech, and so which wasn't necessarily what I wanted to do. And so I was the one within my family who kind of broke that line, specifically because I was looking to be my authentic self once I arrived to an MBA and not just go to a school because my family has gone there or because it's top three or whatnot. And so I think that's super important. And I would take advantage of all the different activities the schools put together. Like Mariel was saying at the beginning, try to go to the schools if you can. I know, for example, at IESE, they try to match some admission weekend with this activity or event that we have called Multiculti. And at these events, basically we have, I don't know, like 40 tables put together by students from 40 different countries. And so they bring the typical food and drink from their countries. And then all of these tables also do a dance. And so it's like a full on festival of nationalities. And I think that if you go to that or you see some of that or you're able to hear about it, it immediately tells you about how you can not only express your authentic self, but also know that you're going to learn about other people's authentic self and how that interaction can be so insightful and rewarding and help you grow personally during your MBA experience.
All right, we are down to our last 3 minutes or so here. So I'm going to ask you guys one last question, and I'm going to ask you to keep your answer to, let's say, 20 to 30 seconds if you can. What's the one thing, the one change you'd like to see your MBA program make? And I'll make sure I get around to all 5 of you, but whenever you have something you'd like to say that's pretty quick, go ahead and jump on in. Roderick?
Yes, I would like to see Tuck do hold a class or just a course on how to have these racial conversations, because the workforce is becoming a lot more diverse now, and people need to be able to converse with one another about topics that they don't feel comfortable with. I think that's something I would do if I could change anything.
Awesome. And I'm going to go clockwise on my screen. Julio.
I think it's a numbers thing. I think HBS, because the class is 940 people, we have a ton of, relatively speaking, Black and Brown students, but it's not enough. And so I think that admissions or other groups need to work to adjust that numbers. We have incredibly strong communities, but I think the school can be doing a better job with students, with faculty, with cases, as we talked about. And I think it's a choice. I don't think there's anything like resources or anything else actually holding them back from making any of those changes.
Ayana?
Yeah, I think for me, I want to see Wharton be able to, I guess, hold training for the professors. I know we've talked a lot about, how to work through having these tough conversations as students, but I think it's really hard for the professors as well. And so it's why we can't see as much diversity in these cases, right? Because they just don't know how to integrate it into their curriculum. And so having the actual faculty be trained in what does diversity, equity, and inclusion look like within higher ed, I think that's really important in terms of strides to continue on the diversity track.
Awesome. Thank you. Daniela.
Definitely. I think one thing I learned today from Ayan, I believe, is that at Wharton they have a leading diversity in organizations course, which we don't have anything similar at ESA. So that would be one major change, would be adding a class that's specifically focused on management regarding diversity and inclusion.
Awesome, thank you. Mary, I'll take us home.
Mine is two-part because it stems from one problem, which is certain states have made it really like illegal to have affirmative action. So it becomes really difficult to manage what you can't measure. And so I think that this really hits schools in two ways. And the things I'd most like to see change are things like Julio was saying, like, I want us to be reporting out really how we are actually doing when it comes to like the demographics at our school, and to have clear goals that we're moving towards. And then I think the same thing for faculty in particular. We know that the PhD pipeline's broken, but I think if we are able to establish clear goals, we're going to do the things that we need to meet them. So I think that's what I'd like to see.
Outstanding. Thank you so much, the five of you. And we're about to get kicked out of this studio. If the five of you could stick around backstage for a couple of minutes, want to talk a little bit about things we might want to do on GMAT Club that we could probably use some help with to bring some of these issues into the forum a little bit more. Thank you again, everybody, for joining us. Hit that subscribe button. Come join us for the rest of the MBA Spotlight events. Have 3 more days going through Saturday. So thank you so much, everybody. And thanks a ton to our 5 panelists.